Over the past several months, Black Lives Matter has been embroiled in a major financial scandal. It started, actually, last year when people started complaining about one BLM high-ranking individual's multiple homes. But some people were like, look, if you're the CEO of a massive nonprofit making millions of dollars, well, of course, you'll get paid very well. Then it turns out there was no one running this organization after one of the co-founders left, and that the address where the nonprofit was apparently registered to didn't have anybody working there, and no one knew what was going on. We now have a bigger piece of the puzzle from timcast.com. Black Lives Matter purchased $5.8 million mansion from friend who paid $3.1 million days earlier. Patrisse Cullors described criticism of the purchase as racist and sexist in an Instagram post. My friends, we have a mystery on our hands. It may be that Black Lives Matter laundered $2.7 million to a friend or was ripped off themselves. It's hard to know exactly what happened, but I don't think we're giving anybody the benefit of the doubt. I've done some digging on this story rather quickly just to try and verify some facts, and some things just don't add up. It was reported by, I believe it was New York Mag initially. I believe it's New York Post now, actually, saying the New York Post reported that the property was purchased from televangelists Sean and Sherry Bolts on October 21st, 2020 for $3.1 million. But we do know it was sold October 27th for $5.8 million to Black Lives Matter. First, why is Black Lives Matter spending $6 million on a massive mansion? They called it campus. Well, I can't necessarily fault them, I suppose. They wanted an operational headquarters. They wanted to go in style, and I get it. If people want to donate to BLM, then they deserve to know what their money is being spent on. I'm pretty sure most of the people who donated to BLM don't care what the money is being spent on, so I don't know if that scandal there is all that important. But there are questions about whether or not this was a scheme to funnel donations in the amount of $2.7 million to a friend of the organization. That's where things get interesting. Now, it's tough. We've gone through a bunch of public records. We have the address and information behind the scenes, which we're not going to be publishing. And I got to say, something looks shady. Very, very shady. Could it be that the previous owners were trying to pay off their loan, which was, I could be wrong about this, I believe it was around $3.1 billion. It was a mortgage. Could it be that they were underwater and said, just pay it off, take it, and they passed ownership on to a friend of BLM, who then turned around and said, now you can pay market price, which will transfer 2.7 to me personally, or to an organization owned by Patrisse Cullors. I want to be very careful here. We just have bits and pieces of information. We don't know if anyone did anything wrong. And I do want to mention there are some legitimate reasons for what we may be seeing. And it's hard to know for sure. Take it all with a grain of salt. I am accusing no one of wrongdoing. I'm simply presenting the information as it was reported by major news outlets and then asking questions about what that might mean. Because actually, I want to say I'm a bit of a skeptic. See, I saw this story on my own website. Black Lives Matter purchased $5.8 million mansion from friend who paid $3.1 million days earlier. And it is reported by a couple different outlets. We have this from the Daily Mail. Why did BLM buy LA mansion for $5.8 million from a developer friend who paid $3.1 million for it just 6 days earlier? Transaction raises serious questions, but founder Patrisse Cullors says criticism is racist and sexist. Upon seeing that, my initial reaction was they laundered $2.7 million. That's a simple explanation, right? I then looked up a couple different public records, and our team over at Timcast, our journalists, did as well. And it looks like it actually may be the case that for some reason this was transferred, arguably at a loss, very quickly to somebody who then 6 days later sold it for a premium and pocketed the cash. But that doesn't necessarily mean BLM was laundering money. It could just mean they got ripped off, or someone said, I got a really great deal. Why don't you guys buy this mansion from me? Depends on who you want to trust. First, let's read from timcast.com. After a Los Angeles mansion was purchased by a real estate developer working for Black Lives Matter founder Patrisse Cullors for $3.1 million, The activist organization bought the property 6 days later for $5.8 million in cash. It also sounds like Patrisse Cullors may have been laundering money to herself. Again, don't know. They say, according to New York Mag report released on Monday, the National Black Lives Matter group purchased a $6 million mansion in Los Angeles with donor funds in October 2020. BLM took measures to keep the purchase a secret. On Wednesday, Cullors responded to questions over the cash purchase, describing the criticism as racist and sexist. Cullors spoke out, calling the New York Magazine article a despicable abuse of a platform that's intended to provide truthful information to the public. She said the author had a proven and very public bias against me and other black leaders. The expansive estate was purchased by Diane Pascal, the financial manager for the LLC, Janaya and Patrisse Consulting. Interesting. The New York Post reported the property was purchased from televangelists Sean and Sherry Boltz October 21st, 2020 for $3.1 million. Now, I do believe that is correct based on records we've seen, but again, not completely sure. Just want to make sure that's being presented, because the reason I'm saying not sure is not, look, I don't like covering stories where it's like, we're going to accuse someone of wrongdoing and we have no idea what happened. No, quite the opposite. People are assuming very serious wrongdoing, and I want to point out, we don't know exactly what happened. And I want to present some skepticism here, because I can actually explain away some of the issues here, but take it with a grain of salt. Again, make up your own mind. Within a week of the purchase, ownership was transferred to an LLC in Delaware, named after the property's address, public records show. The mansion is reportedly dubbed Campus in internal emails from BLM. Cullors and other BLM leadership have since used the property to serve as a backdrop for videos. According to emails obtained by New York Mag, the property is also dubbed a safe house for leaders whose safety has been threatened. BLM leadership offered a statement to New York Magazine regarding the purpose of the use of the property. On April 1st, Shalamia Bowers, a BLM board member, said the house would serve as a housing and studio space for recipients of the Black Joy Creators Fellowship. The fellowship announced the same day, provides recordings, resources, and dedicated space for Black creatives to launch content online and in real life focused on abolition, healing justice, urban agriculture, and food justice, pop culture, activism, and politics. The $2.7 million increase in value in less than a week has not been explained. Now, the first thing I want to mention, why transfer ownership to an LLC in the name of the property? Some may argue, simple. You want to obfuscate ownership, and not for any nefarious reasons, but because you want to protect the identity of the people who actually live there or who own the property. Now, that doesn't necessarily work with LLCs. You'd have to go with a private trust. An LLC, you can easily look up public records on who owns the LLC, and it may obfuscate some shareholders in the property. That could protect them. But you're going to see who the principal officers are, and it won't protect everybody. So it's some level of privacy having an LLC purchase it, and it protects individuals from liability. If you own, say, 5 properties, and someone slips, falls, and gets hurt on one of your properties, well, if the LLC holding that property owns other properties and the person sues, they can target all assets of the company. Typically, what happens then is people set up LLCs to own individual properties so that liability is restricted to just that one property. Makes sense. But the question remains, a $2.7 million increase. Well, my friends, questions. We looked up public records, and we did see what the New York Post had reported on earlier, that it was initially $3.1 million and then transferred a few days later, 6 days later, for 5.8. And that seems to be the big question. So let me pull up this right here. Hopefully there's no identifying information on it. Okay. We have this image. It shows sales records. When I first saw the story, I immediately said, this sounds like a very, very serious bit of evidence suggesting money laundering on the part of Black Lives Matter, which may be the case. However, they say it was 6 days later that it was purchased for $3.1 million and then sold for $5.8. When I pulled up records on Zillow, what I found was that on September 29th, 2016, it was sold. The mansion was sold for $3.1 million. That is likely it was sold to these televangelists. On September 16th, 2020, it was listed for sale at $5.8 million. I mean, okay, I guess that makes sense with a price increase. However, as these other outlets have pointed out, the value of the home is 253% higher than neighboring properties. That is to say, the home should not be worth 5.8. Right now, it should be worth around 3.1. So why was it listed in September for 5.8? I believe, let me see if New York Post, I want to make sure I show this, if I can pull this up. I want to be very, very careful on all the different sources. So I don't know if the New York Post has it. Actually, maybe the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail reported this the other day. I believe they initially got it wrong. The Daily Mail said 250 times when it's actually 253. Here we go. 257. There it is. The 1936 mansion is 257.43% more expensive than similar homes in its Studio City neighborhood, according to Realtor.com. Makes no sense. But what doesn't make sense is the house was listed 4 years after being purchased for close to double the price, which is already very high considering neighboring costs. There was a price change on September 18, 2020 of 0%. I don't know why that's listed. Then it says October 27th, 2020, it was listed as sold at 5.8. Now, when I saw that, I said something doesn't add up. They said it was sold October 21st, 2020. 6 days later, sold on the 27th. That is likely because there was a transfer between two individuals to the Diane Pascal in question on October 21st for an undisclosed sum. Now, that's where things get strange. It seems that it may have been transferred. I mean, we don't know. It's an undisclosed sum. The value listing was at 5.8. It was listed as sold at 5.8, and then it was purchased at 5.8. So it's entirely possible. It's all on the level, and everyone's got this wrong. The issue, though, is they're the ones saying. Let me read this, okay? There's a lot of redundant information here, but I got to read through this so you guys can see the statements. It's really frustrating, but let me read. They say three leaders of the social justice movement, Patrisse Cullors, Alicia Garza, Melina Abdullah, recorded a video last June in the House. Cullors at the time said she was weeks removed from being in survival mode after the Post's exclusive reporting in April revealed the purchase of 4 high-end homes. Cullors and her colleagues didn't reveal any details about the swanky 6,500 square foot mansion. The property was purchased in October 2020 with funds that had been donated to Black Lives Matter. The 7-bedroom residence was purchased by a man named Diane Pascal 2 weeks after they received $66.5 million from its fiscal sponsor earlier that month. Pascal is the financial manager for Janaya and Patrisse Consulting, an LLC operated by Cullors and her spouse, Janaya Khan, New York Magazine reported. Ownership was transferred within a week to an LLC in Delaware, ensuring the property's owner wouldn't be disclosed. Okay, this is why I'm a skeptic, and I want to make sure this is out there. It sounds like Diane may have just bought the house for what it was listed as being sold at, 5.8, by the people who owned it, and the price went up because it'd been 4 years since they bought it, and it was transferred to an LLC very simply because they wanted to limit liability, and this sounds like it's not that big a deal, and there's nothing really nefarious happening here. The issue is the initial transfer to Diane was an undisclosed sum, which seems to make no sense. And I believe it's being reported that Diane actually said it was a sale for 3.1. So it's hard to know because you've got so many different sources and conflicting information. This is the story from the Daily Mail. She insisted the expansive property was bought as a safe space. That's Patrisse Cullors, claimed it was racist and sexist. They're going to say that the property was purchased on October 21st by Diane Pascal. That doesn't explain why it's not listed in the sale records. On his Instagram page, okay, here we go. Pascal bought the property from televangelist Sean and Sherry Bolts, according to property records. And Sean Bolts told the New York Post the sale was for 3.1. There it is. So you mean to tell me Shane Bolts sold it for 3.1, even though they had listed it for 5.8? That's what they're claiming? That's what's being reported? Is that just incorrect reporting? This is where things get hard to break down. And so I don't even see this guy listed in the New York Post story, to be completely honest. They say yet 6 days after it was purchased, it was transferred $5.8 million. I think it's fair to say and it's important to point out, this could just be bad reporting. And that's what shocked me. And I was like, we got to talk about that. This dude may have bought it for what it was listed at. It was listed in September, and then transferred it to the LLC all on the level. The bigger question, and if you've got an issue with this, the real issue is, why is BLM buying a $6 million mansion with this funds? Now, what does it come down to for me? People who donated to BLM, that's on them, and I don't think they care. I really don't. Remember when they were doing that Build the Wall Foundation and Steve Bannon got in trouble? And they were like, he said they weren't going to pay this guy a salary and he ripped off the donors. I'm like, dude, not a single donor cares that some dude was getting a salary from the nonprofit. It was crazy to me that they filed charges against any of them. I think Trump pardoned them both. So if the donors don't care, then what's really the issue? If Black Lives Matter chooses to buy a massive mansion, but people don't care what they do with the money, and I got to be honest, that's a fact. Like, no one knows what BLM actually does. They don't pay attention to the news, so why would they care? And then if they do find out, they're just going to be like, well, it's quite, I don't care what BLM does so long as they're helping, I guess. Could it be that this other Sean Boltz was selling the property to marked up value to make money? Here's where it gets there are some questions that need to be answered. Why is the property selling for 257% higher than it's actually worth? And if Sean Boltz is saying the sale was for $3.1 million, why would we not believe him? Are we to believe that Black Lives Matter, Diane Pascal, who purchased the property for an undisclosed sum, are we to believe that Sean Boltz was able to convince this guy to give them $2.7 million on top of the actual value of the house as per the neighborhood? Or what makes more sense? This is the challenge, my friends. Does it make more sense that Diane Pascal secured the house for an undisclosed sum and then immediately transferred it for 5.8 so that they could pocket $2.7 million in donations that were going to Black Lives Matter? Perhaps a money laundering scheme to siphon funds away from Black Lives Matter. But this will require some real investigation, not property. Look, there's a bit of investigation in the work that I'm doing and the team at timcast.com. And we can ask questions about what we think may be most likely. We don't know. The Daily Mail could have gotten this wrong. Sean Boltz told the New York Post the sale was for $3.1 million. Okay. Maybe Sean Boltz is lying. Maybe Sean Boltz is saying that because now this Diane Pascal guy is going to be like, wait a minute, you ripped us off? That's not uncommon. You got people who are well off. They go to someone and say, hey, I need this job done. And the person's going to realize they're rich and say, okay. And they're going to charge them 100% more than they would normally. And the rich person's going to be like, I don't know, I guess, whatever. They got $66 million. They're told, you better buy it now. It's worth $6 million. And they say, okay, here's the check. Cash purchase. Because they didn't need loans. So they didn't even think twice about it because they were like, whatever, we bought it. And now we can just say the house is worth this much because that's how much we paid for it. And we're not going to sell it anyway. Or it could be that Sean Boltz, it could be ripped him off, or in desperation, selling the house for what they bought it for to pay off the mortgage and make a move to get a mortgage on a new property because the house wasn't going up in value. I mean, think about this. It was sold for 257% higher than similar homes. Stands to reason it was a bad investment, that they bought it at a very high rate, a very high price, and they weren't making any gains on it. And they knew. So they said, how about we sell it, wipe our loan clean, and we can move somewhere else that will be a better investment, or just get out from going underwater. Because if the prices tank, we're going to be in trouble and trapped. And then this Diane Pascal guy who purchased it for an undisclosed sum cranks up the price and says, give me 5.8, puts 2.7 in his pocket. I don't know, man. That seems to be the insinuation here. And based on what we've seen, it's hard to know for sure, other than for me to say there are legitimate reasons why you would transfer this to an LLC. That doesn't seem all that nefarious to me. But BLM is Feds pro BLM activist for allegedly pilfering funds from charity. March 9th. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not giving the benefit of the doubt to these people. We got some serious questions that need to be answered. Monica Gannon Grant, the founder of and CEO of the charity group Violence in Boston, rose to prominence in the Boston BLM community and now facing several federal indictments, her and her husband, for pilfering funds. among other things. Now, it's not the same organization as the BLM Global Network Foundation, but I'm not going to give the benefit of the doubt to these individuals. I think it's entirely possible they just siphoned off $2.7 million. I also think it's very possible the reporting is wrong. I'm wondering why some of these finer details weren't brought up in these reports about the Zillow records. It looks like the Boltzes were trying to sell this for $5.8 million. But I'll say this too. If there was a scheme to funnel $2.7 million from Black Lives Matter into private hands, they would be planning it longer than 6 days. In which case, could it be that even Boltz is in on it? That they went to him and he said, it's worth 3.1. And they said, what if we cut a deal where we can extract money from this nonprofit, give you a kickback? It's all speculation. It's all speculation and insinuation without evidence. What I would say is, I think this warrants an actual criminal probe. That is not to say anyone here did anything wrong, but law enforcement should start looking into these records and figure out what's going on here, because it may be that this Boltz guy knew his property was not worth 5.8, listed it so that it would appear in public records. Then, here's the crazy thing. There is no listed sale on October 21st to Diane Pascal, only the transfer to the LLC at 5.8. Something doesn't add up. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's nothing, man. I don't know. My question is, if it was sold 2016 at 3.1, why would it still be sold at 3.1? According to Realtor.com, its price did not increase. Maybe that makes sense because of the pandemic. It could be that in 2016, it was 3.1. But because people are fleeing these cities and these areas that don't want to live there, demand for it has gone down. And now they're worried they're going to go underwater because nobody wants to move into cities anymore. So they said, we need to get rid of this. Listed it for sale. Dude said, we'll clear your loan. We'll give you a kickback, but we're not buying it for 5.8. We want a cut. I don't know, man. I don't know. This is one of those stories where something doesn't add up, and I really just wanted to present that something doesn't add up. But I believe the internet sleuths, that all of you with your decentralized computing power can figure out what's going on in this matter. We did some digging. Stories busted. It could be exaggeration, speculation, and a lot of nothing. But something just doesn't make sense. Maybe you guys will find out. Is Daily Mail just reporting wrong? Is the New York Post reporting wrong? What's with this undisclosed amount transfer? Why? Why would there be a transfer in an undisclosed amount? Maybe it wasn't a transfer. Maybe it was transferred to the individual who wasn't actually the purchaser, and it was just transferred back to the nonprofit, to Black Lives Matter. Maybe the 3.1 number is incorrect, and maybe Black Lives Matter just bought an expensive house and didn't care how much it costs. Maybe they're just not good at allocating funds, which wouldn't surprise me. Hey, man. I'll leave it there. And of course, we're going to keep digging into the story to see what's going on, but interesting nonetheless. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.